Right, this is topic 5, conducting startup market research. I'm going to split this one into two because it'll end up being a massive file. So this is part 1 of topic 5. So hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to explain the methods of primary and secondary market research. You will know the benefits and of the different methods of market research. You'll be able to explain the difference between quantitative and qualitative market research. In the next topic, you'll be able to analyse the importance of sampling and the factors that influence the choice of sample, and you'll also be able to evaluate the usefulness of various methods for small business startups. Remember, that's the key to everything we do in this module. Everything has to be focused on small businesses. Some key terms before we start, just to remind you that marketing, this is the anticipation, so working out in advance and satisfying of what customers want in a way that delights them and also meets the needs of the organisation. Market research is the systematic and objective collection and analysis and evaluation of information that is intended to assist the marketing process. So that's market research is how we anticipate what customers want, which is what we've just said that marketing is. Primary research is the collection of information first-hand for a specific purpose, and secondary research is the use of information that has already been collected for a different purpose. So there's lots of different reasons that we have market research then. So descriptive reasons. We might look at achieving objectives. Has the firm achieved its target sales figures, for instance, or its desired percentage market share? Identifying trends. Are sales rising or are they falling? Is the trend stable or is it unpredictable? And to make comparisons. How are the firm's sales, for instance, performing relative to a competitor? Is advertising expenditure, how much we spend on putting adverts on TV or in newspapers, is that matching its rivals? Is it appealing to the right market segments? Are we appealing to the same market segments as our competitors? We might have market research to explain what's going on. For instance, does weather affect sales? If so, how big is the impact and is it consistent? So many supermarkets, for instance, look in advance look at weather forecast many days in advance over the summer to tell whether they should put barbecues on sale or whether they need to put out more ice cream. Is the brand name attractive to targeted customers? So does the brand do what it's supposed to do? What are the main reasons why customers buy the product? How can this information be used in the business's marketing? So let me think. For instance, if it's food, is the food being bought purely to stop us from being hungry? So is it just sandwiches at lunchtime, or is the food being bought for luxury reasons? So staying on a Friday night, celebrating an anniversary. If it's for luxury reasons, perhaps we can get away with charging more for it. And why was a promotional campaign unsuccessful? How did we get it wrong? What can we do next time? Market research can also be used for predictive reasons. So information can be used to predict trends and find links between sets of data. This will help the business to predict what will happen in the future. For instance, we can calculate the extent to which advertising influences new sales. We can discover whether introducing a new flavour might affect the sales of existing flavours, say of ice cream. Predicting whether a new price will boost sales value, because it might mean that less people buy, even if we put the price up, which might mean we actually come out with less money. And examining the likely effect of the arrival of a new competitor on profit levels. And the final reason that we have market research is to explain things. So when a new product is introduced, there will be no existing information to guide what the organisation should do. In this situation, a business may conduct research into the probable customer reaction, so what they're likely to do. This might mean that we look at the possible level of demand. It might mean that we research the most suitable market segments that need to be targeted. We might research how much people are willing to pay, what price is ideal, and it might mean the best way of promoting a product. So if it's a new technology product, is the best way of promoting that on a radio station that older people listen to, for instance. We've got to try and explore, what would be the best way of marketing that product. When we're asked to, remember, a lot of what we do in business studies, we like to put things into categories. So when we're asked to categorize market research or classify it, we can do it in two ways. We can say how the data in this market research is collected. So that's either primary or secondary data. We'll look at that, what that means. Or what type of data that we're given, or what type of data we end up with. So the content of the data, that will either be quantitative or qualitative. Again, we'll come on to that later on. So when it comes to how the data is collected, as I say, essentially there's primary and secondary. So let's look first at primary. Although we call it primary research actually comes second. It should only be used to complete the gaps that cannot be filled by secondary data. That's what we look at next. Because researchers often need to go out into the field and collect primary data, it is frequently called field research. There are several methods of conducting primary research. Each of them has its own positives and negatives, so we're going to look at each of those in turn. So I've given a little reminder at the bottom here in the blue box, primary market research, the collection of information first-hand for a specific purpose. Not necessarily that you've done it yourself, but someone else has done it first-hand for a specific purpose that we are looking for. So the first thing, or the first method that we look at is experiment. An organisation experiments with a particular approach in certain areas or for a certain time. If successful, then it uses this approach nationally on a more long-term basis. For example, Mothercare experimented with different promotional offers in different stores. The offers that appeared to be most successful in these experiments were the ones that were adopted for use throughout the country. Benefits of this: it's relatively a cheap way of finding out customer preferences, and it considers actual customer behaviour rather than opinions given in questionnaires. That's really important. If the research that we have is based in reality, it's more likely to be useful than if it's something that we've gathered in terms of opinion. You probably know this, or you might have seen it before, but when you're in a shop, stores often watch customers while you're shopping and gather information on how you react all the way through the process. So from when you walk in the door, when you decide what it is you want to buy, right up until the checkout. This enables stores to gain useful data, such as on the displays or the offers that seem to attract people's most attention. Psychologists are often employed to offer opinions on our reactions. The benefits of this type of market research: the layouts of displays can be modified if observation reveals any problems. For example, supermarkets used to place small packages of products on top shelves as they yielded smaller amounts of profit, until we saw through observations that many of these products were required by elderly customers who were unable to reach them. If they were unable to reach them, they didn't buy them. If they didn't buy them, they didn't make any profit. Observation also examines actual customer behaviour in detail and can sometimes show what customers are thinking behind what their actual purchase. Why are they making them? But the drawbacks of observation, this type of market research, is it is expensive to employ specialist psychologists to observe relatively limited behaviour. So would you really want to be paying thousands of pounds to work out why someone buys a medium-sized box of cereal rather than a large box of cereal? It shows what is happening rather than why it is taking place. So it's what happens, not why. A focus group is the next type of primary market research. So it's a group of consumers who are asked to discuss how they feel about a product or a market. So typically focus groups meet at times convenient to their members, such as weekends and evenings. Benefits of this are they enable a firm to gather detailed information on why customers react in the way that they do. This time it's important that we're looking at why. Why do customers act the way they do? Not what is the way that they act, why do they act in that way? It can help a business modify its products according to these comments or identify gaps in the marketplace. These groups also help uncover new ideas on how to market products or services. If we're listening to how different things work with people, then we can find out, or we can make sure that we meet those needs. Drawbacks of this method of focus groups: sometimes there's an element of what we call bias in a focus group. As the groups consist of people who have a particular interest in the product and may also want to please the company. So this means their views may be less critical than the average customer. So say, for instance, if Apple were to ask or wanted to find out how people are taking their new iPhone 5S, whether they liked it or not, it's pointless to ask people, or it would be dangerous to ask people who are in the Apple store, because we could assume that they already like Apple products. They would be biased towards Apple products. They wouldn't be giving honest opinions. Focus groups are also very expensive to operate. A single focus group can often cost around £2,000, £4,000, £5,000 for a single hour. So it costs a heck of a lot of money just to get what can be limited amount of research for one topic. Next type of primary research would be a survey. So consumers are questioned about products and services. They can take a number of forms, but usually involve completing a questionnaire that is designed to collate the characteristics and views of different types of customers. We'll look at different types of surveys here. So there are personal interviews, postal surveys, telephone interviews, and interview surveys, internet surveys even. So personal interviews, these are done face-to-face with the interviewer filling in the answers given by the interviewee. Benefits of this: so a wide range of information can be obtained because questions can either be closed, where a limited choice of answers are allowed. So do you like this product? Yes or no will be a closed question. Or the questions can be open, where the interview chooses what to say. So why do you like this product? You can give a really open answer. You could give actual sentences. Closed questions are easily to collate and compare. Open questions are better if information about feelings are needed. The interviewer can explain any uncertainties in the wording of the question to the interviewee. This avoids the possibility of answers that are misleading because we didn't understand the question in the first place. Drawbacks of this though: personal interviews can be time consuming, particularly as members of the public may be reluctant to answer questions. The person responding may give false answers to please the interviewer or to get rid of the interviewer. And the interviewer may not select an unbiased cross-section of the public. So if you are a 25-year-old female asking people about their opinions on a new mobile phone company, you might particularly target 25-year-old females in the street. Next type of primary market research, or the next type of survey, is a postal survey. These are posted to the addresses of potential customers, who are then expected to complete them at home and return them, usually in a prepaid envelope, but they have to return them in their own time. Benefits of this are it's very cheap, especially if the surveys are posted by hand rather than through the mail. It can allow for more specific targeting of geographical areas, so you might do certain postcodes, for instance. It may avoid possible bias from a personal survey because you're not meeting the person face to face. And any respondents who have more time to answer the questions might mean that they are willing to put more detail into the survey. Drawbacks though: response rates, the number of surveys that we get back, are usually low. You often find that this is around about 2%. So if we send out 100 questionnaires, we would only expect 2 to come back to us, especially if no incentive is given. You sometimes see these adverts during the day whereby if you take a survey based on your retirement income, you might get a free pen, for instance. There's no guarantee that the responses are representative. As people completing them might just have a strong opinion, or it might be people with a lot of spare time. So you might get responses only from people who work part-time, only for people who are retired, or only from people who don't like the product that they're being questioned about. So all of this will be biased. There's that word again. It also might mean that you've got to give away free gifts in order to get your responses back, which makes it not as cheap as it could have been. Next type of survey would be a telephone interview. So a market researcher would telephone members of the public seeking their answers to certain questions. Telephone interviews are particularly popular with businesses that are seeking to get an opinion, and they often involve questions related to recent purchases. Car companies are very good at doing this. They'll ring you up and they'll ask what it was like in the dealership, whether you were offered a test drive, what made you choose that car, etc. The benefits of telephone interviews are that they're cheap and they can be targeted directly at known customers. They are also used because it's what's called we get into the house. Whereas postal surveys are often binned because they're junk mail, relatively few people refuse to answer the phone. So if the phone's ringing, it really does make you want to answer it. Drawbacks though, detailed questions are impossible as interviewees are reluctant to give up too much time on the phone, and they're starting to become increasingly unpopular because of the amount of telesales calls that people get, so things being sold to you over the phone. With that in mind, you've got to make sure that you don't confuse telephone interviews, which are a method of gaining market research, with telesales, as this is a form of selling to people, obviously. These two concepts are easily confused because telesales are often used to introduce the customers as market research. They start off saying, can we ask a few questions? But then the telephone caller will attempt to persuade the customer to buy a product or service. So don't get the two mixed up. The final type of survey will be an internet survey. So questionnaires on internet sites enable customers to express their views about a product or a service or a company, giving valuable information to the business whose website is visited. Benefits of this: it is relatively inexpensive to place a questionnaire on a website. Free if you own the website, in fact. It means you can target those most likely to be interested in buying the product, as these are the people who have made a conscious decision to visit the website. So sometimes you see them on Amazon, for instance. Would you mind taking a 2 or 3 minute questionnaire to tell us about this website? The very fact that you're on the Amazon website shows that you're interested in Amazon. Because of that, it means that response rates are much higher than postal surveys. This type of survey can be updated frequently, which means that we get really good topical data for the firm, contextual data that's up to date, data that we know matches what it is that we need to know at that point in time. It also may be possible to use a detailed questionnaire, particularly if the respondent has an incentive to complete it. So Amazon, for instance, again, sometimes give you 10% or 5% off your purchases if you're willing to take a survey. As always, though, there's some negatives. The sample will tend to be biased towards people with a particular interest in the product or service. So again, what I'm saying there is if you're asking questions on Amazon, the only reason you've been chosen is that you're on the Amazon site, which means that you might already have a positive opinion about them. They'll also be less relevant for organisations whose target market does not use the internet. It's pointless you putting a survey on the internet if you're trying to attract children on the age of 5. They're not really going to be using the internet that much. Or adults over the age of 80. They won't be using the internet as much either. Next method of primary research then, test marketing. So by launching a product in a limited part of the market, so it's quite often or usually geographical areas, so the north or the south of the country, a firm can discover customers' opinions. For instance, Sainsbury's released a new type of muffin in certain stores to compare it against different types or different flavours that they already had to see whether it sold, to see whether it reduced sales on other types of muffin. Positives of this are the results of the marketing are a relatively accurate predictor of future popularity as they're based on actual purchases. So not what would you do, but what you have done, asking customers what they actually have done or seeing what customers actually have bought, not asking them what they might buy. It's also a useful way of gauging popularity of the product without incurring the expense of a national launch. So we might just launch in a few stores rather than all of our stores. This is especially useful in markets where there are high failure rates for new products. So it might be very expensive, for instance, to launch a new flavour of crisps. But if that doesn't work, then we've lost all of that money on launching nationally. If we just launch in a smaller area and it doesn't work, then we haven't lost as much. But fewer firms now use test marketing because it can lead to what we call Me Too products or copies being produced by rivals. Therefore, can reduce the time during which a firm benefits from being the only producer. So if you launch, so when Sainsbury's, for instance, launched that new flavour of muffins in the Northwest, for instance, Tesco might see that they did it and launched the same type of thing. So Sainsbury would only have that special type or the new and unique type of flavour of muffin for a short length of time before everyone else copied them. Also, the delay in launching a product nationally may endanger the chances of making a product more profitable. So again, because someone else could copy that idea. So that's primary research. Now we need to look at secondary research. So secondary information is found by examining published documents found through desk research. Firms may be able to save a great deal of money by using data that has already been compiled, already been researched, already been found. We know that market research is never going to be 100% reliable, so it is often more cost effective to accept cheap, reasonably accurate and fairly relevant secondary data than to spend vast sums of money on primary research. What we might do is spend a little bit of money on primary research to fill in any gaps that's left from our secondary research. So secondary can take many forms. Firms will select data that suits their particular purposes. That's the key here. We have to make sure that whatever secondary research we use, we choose the one that is right for us. Another reminder in the blue box there. So secondary research, the use of information that has already been collected for a different purpose. So types of market research that is classed as secondary market research. So government publications. The Office for National Statistics, which is part of the government, provides information on economic and social trends so that firms can investigate the implications for their business. So it might show that the population has more older people. So how do we change our packaging to make it easier for older people to use it? It might show that people are getting married later in life. So could it be that we can make our, say if we owned a wedding venue, it might mean that we can afford to make it more pricey because people have saved up longer. Detailed surveys from government publications on individual industries are also prepared. The Census of Population provides a detailed survey on who actually lives in the country once every 10 years. So that tells you about age, it tells you about education, religion, pastimes, vital information if we want to know about our customers. We can also use newspapers, so broadsheet newspapers such as The Times and The Guardian contain articles on specific industries. So there's a business section in The Times, there's a finance section in The Telegraph, for instance. Certain magazines such as The Economist, that again talks about the economy. Grocer Today tells us about what people are buying in grocery shops, which means that we can try and work out what people might be buying in the future, so it provides helpful data through articles and surveys that they complete. Company records are often a valuable source of information such as sales figures, accounts, and previous surveys are easily accessible and have no cost attached to them. These are secondary sources because they are not going to be used for their original purpose. The original purpose of company records is probably going to be to give information to shareholders or owners. So if I was to use this information to find out how much I should charge for my product, that's not the original purpose of that company record. We might want to look at competitors. So what brochures do they release? What promotional material, what company reports and investor information do they have? And how can we use it to work out what we should do? We might use a market research organization. So it's not just primary research that these companies do. So there are actually companies, I think Mintel is one, These companies actually produce primary research, but they can also do secondary research, which they hold on file and we can buy from them. Loyalty cards are a massive source of secondary information as well. So cards such as the Nectar card or the Tesco Club card allow a range of businesses to identify the spending patterns of customers and target them with relevant promotions. So if you think, for instance, the Nectar card is Sainsbury's, it's Barclaycard, it's Debenhams, it's BP. So we can find out what people are buying in other shops and see if that helps us. And the internet is a rapidly increasing source of secondary data, but it should be treated with caution as it lacks the reliability of the other sources that we've just talked about. So lumping these together then, lumping secondary research together, what are the benefits then? So the benefits of secondary market research vary according to the relevance and the detail of the data, whether it is reliable and up to date. We have to take that into account. So what might be useful secondary research for Tesco might be useful secondary research for Subway. We have to choose what's right for us. We also have, in terms of benefits though, we have to bear in mind that the information is already available, so quick decisions can be based upon it. We don't have to go out and find it. It's probably going to be there already for us. It's cheaper than primary research. So for some government research on the company's own information, for instance, this will even be free. Or if we're buying it from these market research organisations that I mentioned before, so someone like Mintel, they do normally charge for research, but because they're selling it to lots of people, they don't charge as much as if we were collecting ourselves, because we'd have to do all the work ourselves. Secondary surveys are often conducted regularly, so the information is particularly helpful in identifying trends over time, because it might be that a particular survey is done every 6 months or done every year. Drawbacks of secondary market research though, the information might be out of date, and which means it could be leading and means that we could make incorrect decisions. Since the information is available to others, it is unlikely to give the organisation any advantages. So we couldn't use secondary market research probably to come up with a unique selling point, for instance. There may actually be no relevant secondary data to meet the specific needs of what we want. And as the data is collected by other organisations for their use, the secondary data may not be as accurate or reliable as data that we collect ourselves. We can't control that accuracy or reliability either. So because of that, there is a danger that over-reliance on this data could lead to poor decisions being made. Little tip from the examiner here. So when questions are based on market research, when we're asked about market research, you must always think about the quality of the data that is going to be collected before we advise on what the company should do. So when we're talking about market research, always try to think of these 3 questions. So is there going to be any possible bias in the sample? So the people that we choose who we're going to ask, are the questions that we're going to ask them biased, or is the person who's going to be asking the questions biased? Is the sample large enough? So if I ask one person in the street, do you have a car? And they say, no, I don't have a car. We couldn't then say 0% of the people in England have a car. That's a far too small sample. We've got to have a sample that's representative, but sampling is something that we'll come on to in the second part of this topic. And is the information recent, and is it likely to have changed? It's pointless trying to make our business decisions on information that's 10 years old, because things will have changed in that time. So we said at the beginning that we might categorise market research on how we collect the data, but we also said that we could categorise it on what type of data is actually given. So the 2 types here are qualitative data and quantitative data. So qualitative market research is all about collecting information about the market, but it's based on subjective factors such as opinions and reasons. So this deals with issues such as why or how. For instance, with this information, ITV might be able to see why people watch Emmerdale. Is it the quality of the acting? Is it the scenery? Or is it the storylines that actually go on? An organisation can use this information to plan appropriate strategies. For instance, Sky has been able to attract more advertisers to its football programs as a result of market research or qualitative market research that shows that football matches were watched by larger groups of people than other programs. So people often don't watch football on their own, for instance. The normal measure of demand, which was the number of sets being used, therefore underestimated the number of people actually watching the programs. So with Emmerdale, you probably watch it on your own. So if 1 million sets are tuned to Emmerdale, then probably 1 million people are watching it. But with football, people often get together, and there might be 4 or 5 people sat around a table. So qualitative research has showed that more people watch football, therefore Sky have been able to get more revenue. So qualitative market research asks it how we interact with a product or how we buy a product and why we do it. So benefits of this are, by examining why customers behave in a certain way, businesses can gain a greater insight into what it needs to do in order to appeal to customers. So qualitative market research can be used to appeal to a new customer in order to increase a firm's sales. If we know why people buy or why they don't buy, we can change our products to match their needs. The research can also highlight issues that a business was not aware of, so it can take action to overcome problems or to take opportunities that might not have been considered before. And qualitative research can give detailed insights into customers' thinking as to why they buy products. This can enable businesses to modify its marketing strategies and methods in order to persuade customers to buy more. A really good example of this is WD-40. So that's a type of oil that is in a spray can. But when it was first released, WD-40 was only really there to stop things from rusting or to stop things from sticking. But because WD-40 did lots of research into why people use it and how people use it, it's used for massive amounts of things. So you can use it to get stains out of your clothes, you can use it to polish a kettle, you can use it to clean windows. All because WD-40, the company who own it, found out why people use it, how they use it. Drawbacks of qualitative data though. It is expensive to gather qualitative information, as it does usually require a skilled person to interpret it, to say what it means. Because of this, most qualitative research is conducted on a very small scale. This can lead to bias or unrepresentative opinions. It's also difficult to tabulate the data, so you can't really put qualitative data in a table, you can't put it in a graph. And it's also difficult to compare with other data, as opinions are often unstructured. You can't really compare someone's opinion with someone else's. But if the research is too structured, it will inhibit the independence and accuracy of the opinions being expressed. So if you design a question in a certain way to make sure it can be put in a table, then it might be that the information gathered isn't as useful. So we explained what qualitative data is. That was looking at why and how. Quantitative, as you can probably tell from the beginning, quantitative, gives us numbers. So it can answer questions like how many, who, and how often. So going back to that Emmerdale example, to sell advertising space, Emmerdale has to be able to show that the program is being watched by 8 million viewers, for instance. 30% of these viewers are in a particular age range or social group. And they also need to show that, say for instance, 75% watch every episode. So figures can be used to show changes in popularity, and quantitative data is an excellent way, or is easily used for analysis. It doesn't, however, explain why people act in a certain way, but we can compare to how they might have acted last week, for instance. Benefits of using quantitative market research is that it summarises data in a very concise and meaningful way. For example, 8 out of 10 cat owners prefer whiskers. Tesco has a 32% market share. Those are figures that we can easily talk about, easily relate to. The use of numerical data makes it easier to compare results with those of other organisations, such as competitors or other divisions of the same organisation. So Tesco fruit and veg has a 25% share of the entire fruit and veg market, but the sales of bread that accounts for 30% of the entire market. So we could compare different parts of the same organisation, or we could say Sky has a 50% market share in the pay television market, whereas TalkTalk only has a 5% of the share. Numerical data can also be used to identify trends and predict future trends. Drawbacks, though, as we've said, it only shows what is happening rather than why it is happening. So the data produced is less useful than qualitative data in helping an organisation to understand the reason behind why things are happening. It can also lack reliability and validity if the sample is biased or too small. We keep coming back to this idea of things being biased. We've got to make sure in market research that we're not trying to sway people one way or the other. Just something to remember as well. In a survey, closed questions, so those with a restricted number of answers, so yes and no, tend to be used to gather quantitative data. Qualitative data often comes from open questions, though, where you can record your own response, your own answer. This gives great accuracy. However, some qualitative data is gathered by closed questions because there is far too many possible answers and therefore it will be impossible to collate. So even some qualitative data can be collected using closed questions. Right, so as I've said before, this is part 1 of topic 5. There is going to be a part 2 on sampling. Don't forget to fill in the questionnaire and submit it as you did in the last one. The address will be in the description below. Thanks very much.